One cold day in October, Khalid found himself forced to make a decision he never wished to make. He had traveled to a strange city in search of a temporary job opportunity, but he had not expected things to be this difficult. All the hotels in the city were full because of a huge local festival, and he had only one choice left: to stay in a cheap inn on the outskirts of the city. When he arrived at the inn, the manager greeted him with a forced smile. There was a musty smell emanating from the walls that concealed something unclear. The inn looked very old, with decaying walls and wooden floors that creaked with every step. However, Khalid had no other choice. When he asked for a room, the manager told him that the only room available was room number 213. Room 213 was at the end of a long, dark corridor, where the lighting was dim and the air was unnaturally cold. The corridor was so dark it seemed to swallow up light and warmth that Khalid hesitated for a moment before booking the room. As he logged in, he noticed that the other employees were exchanging strange glances and whispering in low voices about this particular room. But when he asked them why, they either ignored his question or quickly changed the subject. That night, Khalid sat on his old bed, trying to adjust to the strange atmosphere. The room was very small, with a wall full of old scratches and some mysterious letters written in an illegible handwriting. He tried to ignore it, and decided to read a book until he felt sleepy. At about 2:13 a.m., Khalid heard soft knocks on the room door. It sounded like someone was tapping the wood with their fingertips. He stopped reading and walked toward the door, thinking that a colleague of his might need something. But when he opened the door, there was no one in the hallway. The lights were dim as always, and the corridor was completely empty. Khalid felt confused, but convinced himself that it might have been just his imagination or sound caused by the wind. He returned to his bed and lay down, but he could not sleep easily after that. He felt that the air in the room had become colder, and that there was something strange watching him. The next night, the same thing happened again. But this time, the knocks were louder and more insistent. Khalid woke up from his deep sleep, feeling that something unusual was happening. He got up slowly, walked to the door, and opened it carefully. Once again, there was no one in the corridor. But this time, he felt that the room itself had changed in some way. Things were not in their original places. The book he had been reading the night before was now on the floor, though he had left it on the little table beside the bed. The curtains were tightly closed, although he had left them open before he went to sleep. Khalid began to feel anxious. He tried to return to the bed, but he heard a strange sound coming from inside the room. It was a sound similar to the creaking of old wood, as if something was moving slowly across the floor. His heart began to beat quickly, but he did not dare to look around. Instead, he covered his head with the blanket and tried to sleep. On the third night, Khalid had decided to stay awake to understand what was happening. He sat on the bed, holding a small lamp in his hand, his eyes fixed on the door. Time was passing slowly, and everything was quiet, until 2:13 a.m. This time, the knocking was loud and persistent, as if someone was trying to break down the door. Khalid felt panicked, but he didn't open the door. Instead, he stayed where he was, covering his ears with his hands, trying to ignore the sound. After several long minutes of continuous knocking, the sound suddenly stopped. A heavy silence fell in the room, but it did not last long. Khalid heard a new voice, this time very close to him. It was a low, whispering voice, as if it was coming from right behind his ear. "Let me in." Khalid jumped up and quickly turned his head towards the source of the sound. But there was no one there. The room was completely empty, except for him. Yet, he felt that there was something else present with him. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the air itself had become compressed. Then he heard another sound, a slow, annoying creak. He turned to the old wardrobe in the far corner of the room. Its doors were tightly closed, and it began to open slowly, as if something were pushing it from the inside. When the doors opened fully, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Inside the closet, there were eyes, pale, lifeless eyes, staring at him from the darkness. There was no face, only eyes, as if they belonged to something inhuman. When Khalid woke up in the morning, he was sitting on the floor beside the bed. When he asked the receptionists about the room, they told him that it was always empty, and that no one had ever stayed there for 3 consecutive nights. Then one of them added in a creepy whisper, "The room chooses who enters it, not the other way around." Since that day, no one dared to enter room 213. The story of the room has become the subject of local legend, with some saying that the eyes that colored saw were the soul of a spirit trapped in the place, searching for a way out, while others say that the room itself is the living creature, and it is the one that summons people to it to uproot them or imprison them in it forever. But the truth is that Khalid was not the first person to disappear after 3 nights in room 213, and he will not be the last.